Hello, I'm Enzo, and this is Holy Shoot, easily one of my favorite new games. To start off, I am not sponsored by Tail Era Interactive, but I was given early access to play Holy Shoot. This game is pretty much Doom, but in the style of Borderlands, but also a roguelike, and I love everything about this game. The style, the graphics, the amazing humor and story, the epic music, and of course, the awesome guns, gameplay, movement, perks, and skills. Just everything in this game is amazing. When I loaded up the game, I wanted to get straight into it. I definitely should have read more on the controls, and I figured that out the hard way later on, but I want to set up the graphics and everything else. The story for this game is perfectly cheesy. It is amazing.
Everything went crazy. It was no more ice cream in the sun and reading comics. Some serious stuff was going down. A special ops crack unit of Sanctum warriors armed themselves and prepare for war. Along the way, legendary heroes known as Ghost Knights are going to lend a hand. Hell is packed to the brim with demons, including 7 mean demon bosses. This is a fast, furious, and very funny battle between trained warriors of the Order of the Sanctum and the sucky demons. Get ready to kick demon ass. It's time to go to hell.
Alright, one quick thing before I get into the rest of the video. Since I got special access to the early access, I got to play before it was officially released, which also meant that I couldn't release any content on it. That's kind of the whole rule. But on July 30th, when the early access was officially released and I could start posting stuff, well, they added a major update to the game. So some of the stuff in this video is not entirely accurate anymore. Like, there are a few new weapons, they actually added more text to Samuel's E, stuff like that. The coolest part is being able to actually go and beat the 3rd level. That was an issue before, but I did get some footage of that, so you guys will see later on. Anyways, back to the video. I did check the credits, and, well, there's nothing there. I know this is early access and all, but I would really like to see the entire cast and crew of this game, because off the bat, I can say that this game has amazing voice actors. This church is our starting area and, well, the main base. For now, I can only play as Supersonic Samuel, but I will unlock the other character later on. Since this is early access, only the portal to hell and the skill tree are available here. I may have completely forgotten about this skill tree until later on. Before entering the level, you get to choose between 3 elemental perks that activate every so often. It really depends on personal preference. After playing quite a few runs, I love Thunder Lance the most, but Whale Fear might be better. Again, I'd have to play around with it more. When I started, I did set all of the graphics to their absolute max, but my computer isn't quite powerful enough for all the crazy Nvidia stuff. But once you get into combat, it totally feels like Doom, and I fell in love with it instantly. There is an insane amount of stuff to talk about here, so give me a bit to explain everything. Each character has 3 abilities, 1 passive and 2 actives. Samuel's passive gives him 10% more movement speed, which is nice. His Q stuns enemies around him for a little bit, and his E gives him a burst of speed. What it doesn't tell you is that his E also gives you a massive fire rate boost and infinite ammo for a short bit. Now, you do have infinite ammo by default, but his E removes the reloading requirement for a tiny bit. I have absolutely nothing bad to say about this game, just some suggestions. Adding some extra information in the skills, like the fire rate and infinite ammo in his E description would be super nice. You've probably noticed that fairy there. At the beginning of each room, you get a challenge. The first one was killing enemies without taking damage, which I completed super fast. The fairy gives you some buffs, attacks enemies, and, most importantly, especially at the start, heals you, but only for a short duration. She's also intentionally annoying, which is pretty funny. Completing challenges is also super important because they give you divine offerings, which is the currency you can use to buy perks back at the hub. But again, I forgot about that until way later on. To progress, you need to kill all of the demons in each room. When there are only a few left, you can see skull icons on your screen, which makes them way easier to find. That's an awesome feature that I love. And the slowed time when you clear a level is the icing on the cake. The safe room has a few things you can interact with. Obviously, there's the loot chest. That's just the greatest thing in there. But there's also a bench to reroll weapon perks. There are two options for character perks, and the healing fountain, which is super important at the beginning. The angelic merchant is the first one I encountered, where you can spend corrupted souls, which are obtained by killing enemies, or destroying those large crystals to get a random perk card. The other building is the soul cleanse, and it costs way more souls, but it lets you choose a perk each level. So I need to check out the angelic merchant more, but I think saving up for the soul cleanse is far more worth it, especially for 3 choices instead of just one random perk. I really don't know if I'm missing something, but I did want to bring that up. Because what I'm trying to say is that the soul cleanse kind of makes the angelic merchant obsolete. I mean, I know angelic is cheaper and all, but it's still more worth it to save up. So I don't know, maybe each one having different perks, or angelic having like rarer perks, would make it so that the players use both of them? I'm not 100% sure. I've spent a ton of time talking about perks, but what about guns? There are 16 different weapons, and that's just so far. I say weapons because there are a few different melee weapons, besides your basic melee attack. And just like any other game, some of the weapons here are way better or way worse than others. But they're all super fun to at least try. I learned after some testing that all weapons do automatically reload and fire. The main difference always seems to be the projectile type or range, interestingly enough. The Bomberman is one of my favorites, both for the name and because it's a freaking grenade launcher. After that, I found the Purifier, which is a flamethrower. Awesome in theory, but it never feels very powerful when you actually use it. And it's one of the weakest weapons in this game, in my opinion. The Jackrabbit, on the other hand, machine pistol. Need I say more? Well, maybe I should, because automatic weapons like this have insane DPS. The Jackrabbit is definitely one of my favorites. The Helldrake is an awesome rocket launcher. You can't really go wrong there either. Also, there are some maps where you have to jump over lava. I did learn later that lava hurts, but it's not instant death, which is nice. The first run was going really well, until I encountered my least favorite enemy. These green skulls that fly at you and deal a ton of melee damage. They're insanely difficult to deal with because they're super fast and hard to spot, and they can take a good chunk of your health away. There's also the gray imp guy that creates like a toxic smoke screen, which does a whole lot of damage, and of course makes it difficult to spot enemies. But overall, that was a really good first run. My second run had an amazing start, where I got easily my favorite weapon, the Crowd Pleaser. It's a classic Thompson, a beautiful, powerful, and super fun submachine gun. Another favorite of mine is the Deadbolt. Sniper rifles. They're always super fun. I used it like a normal sniper at first, but eventually I figured out you can just hold down left click and it'll automatically fire. There's been so much to talk about at this point that I've completely forgotten to mention companion and element perks. I'm not sure when or why they drop, but some enemies drop these power-ups, and you can choose a buff for your element or your companion. Well, depending on which one you get. For element, I like to go the skill that spreads either the stun or the fear to other enemies. The one that makes enemies take more damage is also super powerful. For companion, healing is a good option early on, but duration is obviously the best. Runs 2, 3, 4, and 5 were also good, but there was always this point where I would just lose. Now, I was playing on the abnormal difficulty at the beginning, which is like medium difficulty, and I always thought it was a skill issue, but the one thing I noticed at the start was a major lack of healing. Now, remember, I didn't upgrade my skills at this point. I still forgot about that. but leveling up your skills does give you a massive buff to your runs. A big part of this game is dying, then upgrading your skills, coming back, and your next run will be way better. That's something that's absolutely intended. Run 6 went insanely well. I got very good and found a purple sparrow, which was carrying me with its insane damage, especially with Samuel's E, because you can just spam it. It's like a single shot flintlock pistol, so with E you can just keep firing for a few seconds. It's beautiful. Even better though, I got a legendary version of this gun, which is way better because its magazine size is 2 instead of 1. The main reason I got so far in this attempt was thanks to holding down the right mouse button. This is when I finally started figuring out the controls. Space is jump, and you can double jump, but if you hold the space bar you can actually glide for a little bit, which is kind of like a hover. But holding down right click actually slows down time a little bit. You can probably see why this is incredibly useful. I love this ability, but I have to admit, this hurt my hand after a little while. You know a game gets really intense when it feels like I have arthritis. And this almost never happens to me, by the way. It needs to be a super mechanically intensive game. The most special part about Run 6 is the fact I actually got through all 9 rooms, which means I get to fight the boss, which is super exciting. Alright, so I did not read anything about this in the stuff they gave me. What I've seen so far is that the levels and bosses are all themed after the 7 deadly sins. I'm actually not religious, so I don't know a whole lot about all of this stuff, but I believe that's what it is. The first boss, and, level, is designed around wrath. That's probably why it's more like a Doom level. I mean, they all feel like Doom levels. Anyways, Baron Burns a Lot is an awesome name and fight. Another big part about this game's humor is the bosses and just the lines they throw at you constantly. This is the definition of a great boss fight. Most of his attacks are well telegraphed, so you can dodge them relatively easily, which means I had a great time. It was still stressful because I was practically one-shot the entire fight, but the fairy's healing and the right-click slow time came in clutch. I'm not sure if there's going to be narration for the cutscene at the end, but I'm willing to bet so. Again, this is just a demo version of the early access. After defeating Baron Burns a Lot, I got to continue to the next level, but I died instantly. Well, at least I got to the boss and beat him, so now I can actually play the other character. Toshiko Techno is the other currently playable character. Her passive makes perks 25% cheaper. At least I'm guessing this is Angelic Merchant and Soul Cleanse, but some clarification on the skill would be nice. Her Q makes her invisible for a tiny bit and gives her a speed boost, but shooting removes this invisibility. The skill I really was interested in is her E. Turrets. Turrets are one of the greatest things ever. After playing a few runs as her though, I actually don't think she's that great. Her Q is great for getting out of a bad spot, but becomes worthless once you get into the skill tree. I think it would be way more powerful if you can shoot for a bit without breaking invisibility, or some other buff like getting damage during Q duration, instead of just this invisibility, because it feels practically useless. And tragically, her turrets are super weak as well. They do get more powerful once you level up the skill tree, but so does everything else. The turrets have a super short range and relatively short active duration, not to mention pretty terrible damage, especially when you start using them. The only good thing about the turrets is that they have a quick cooldown, and it can be super fun if you get some perks that buff your skills, either make them cool down faster or give you a chance to use the skill again for free. There was one time where I managed to throw out like 7 or 8 turrets at once, and it was awesome. But again, short range, low damage, and being stationary isn't the best, and I think that's like a slight issue for the pace of this game. But I definitely think her passive is the best part of her kit because it allows her to get more perks, which potentially means more power. It all just depends on luck. Besides her kit though, Toshiko is a ton of fun to play, especially thanks to her voice lines. I mean, like I said at the start, this game has an incredibly solid and talented cast of crew and voice actors. Alright, Here's what you've all been waiting for. You remember the skill tree? Well, here it is. And I mean, I can buy quite a few skills, considering each bar only costs 5 divine offerings. This is a pretty massive skill tree, and there are a ton of powerful skills to choose from. Defense is obviously the key I'm going to need to get further into these levels. There is damage reduction and a ton of healing skills, which is a huge lifesaver. Literally, I mean pretty much all of the skills in here are good, and that's why this is such a big part of this game's progression. If I had remembered about this earlier, my runs would have just gotten better and better, instead of me struggling the whole way through. It's not like those were a bad experience though. I've just been having fun the entire time I've been playing this. And I easily sank 4 hours into playing just these first 2 demo levels. With all these skills, the difference in combat is like night and day. I feel like I'm melting through all the enemies, and I'm loving every second of it. This feels a whole lot like Serious Sam at this point, which I've never played, but I've heard a little bit about. This game isn't a horde shooter, but you know, there are tons of enemies to kill, and you've got plenty of bullets. I managed to get a legendary pair of Judgment Knuckles. I've used the Jawbreaker a bit, which is that boxing glove gun. It's not that great, it has horrible range, but it's hilarious. In stark contrast, the Judgment Knuckles just let me rip and tear, or in this case, punch through my enemies. The melee weapons and the Purifier use energy that recharges over time instead of ammo, but they do get all of the same ammo buffs as guns do. With how well the run is going now, I was super excited to see what the next level would be like. The second area is themed around lust, which makes a whole lot of sense once you see it. This game is completely family friendly, or I'm guessing teen rated at the very least. I can't say 100% for sure, but there's nothing like super adult about this area or game to me. The language doesn't even seem too crazy. This level also has all sorts of new enemies, including what appear to be succubi, and I have to say, I quite enjoy this level. The real issue I faced here was these enemies that reminded me of Marauders in Doom Eternal. I could never forget those shield-wielding menaces. But these guys are nowhere near as bad. You just need to get inside of the shield that they create to fight them. Actually, they're more similar to ion loaders in Borderlands 2. I almost wonder if that was their inspiration. But you don't take damage inside their shield, so not entirely. The other main thing about this level is that perks get way more expensive here, and as you get into the later rooms. On the other hand, there are way more enemies to compensate. I remember in one run that I played, that I unfortunately didn't record, one of my challenges was to kill all the enemies in the room, and it was like 100 plus enemies, like 110 or something like that. That got ridiculous. The boss at the end is Love-mageddon. I really wanted to show more of her off. I really want to show off more of her fight and voice lines, but I kind of melted her instantly. I think the toothpick is the highest DPS gun in the game, which kind of explains why that happened. Her fight is also why I would love to know the cast and crew of this game. Her voice sounds very familiar. Sadly, after beating the second boss, that's all the content of the game so far. Well, again, that was up until July 30th, when the game got an update, and the third level got fixed, I guess? Apparently it was in there the whole time, it was just bugged or something like that. There's also a whole bunch of new weapons that have been added, which is absolutely awesome. Old Reliable is just like the other shotgun, but it's a whole lot better, and I think it has built-in bullet ricochet, I think. I already have the ricochet skills, which I forgot to mention, but those are easily my favorite at this point. I love ricochet in video games. And the other gun there, it's literally like a minigun called the Loudmouth. The issue with that is it's kind of bugged and it completely breaks the audio whenever you fire it. I almost feel like that's intended because of its name, but at the same time it does not feel intended. It's a lot like the Samuel fire rate glitch that I was talking about earlier. Or is that later in this video? Oh, I think that's later. Well, I guess you guys will figure that out. Anyways, back to the third map. The theme of the third boss is greed. and I have to say it's a pretty awesome place. It is incredibly well done, and you'll see the boss a bit later. The third level is also done a bit differently. You know, speaking of greed, now that I think about it, it makes me think a tiny bit like the Binding of Isaac's greed mode, where it's literally a horde mode, but in this case you can't pause it. Either way, there are way fewer rooms, but the rooms themselves are massive with a whole bunch of different areas. And pretty much you have 3 waves of enemies that you have to deal with. There's a special challenge for each one. And yeah, it's just chaos that I absolutely love. Another thing, well, you might not be able to notice, especially if you haven't played, but they actually nerfed a ton of stuff in this game. They completely nerfed all sorts of damage and perks, which is completely understandable. A lot of them were absolutely broken. So I'm not nearly as powerful as before, but this is gameplay with every single skill unlocked. The final thing I want to comment on is actually like the weapons being on fire. That's when you get your kill streak bonus, which is kind of something I've ignored up until this point. Yes, you do get more damage, I believe, for kill streak, something like that. Another major thing they actually nerfed is how many souls you get. So you get way less souls, which means, well, way less perks and stuff like that. It's a little sad, but it saves you a ton of time, you know, sorting all of the perks and everything like that. The final boss of this area is super awesome. Mammon, the Debt Keeper. He has a super cool arena, amazing voice lines, and a neat fight. I kind of just one-shot him though. Yeah, that's the several turrets that you can throw out that I was talking about earlier. It's pretty insane when you can do that. So that's the only reason I think Toshiko's kind of broken. That turret spam. I guess she just abuses perks very well. I guess Samuel uses weapons better than abilities. Overall, this is one of the greatest games I have ever played. It's insanely fun and addicting to play. Again, I'm not being paid to say this. I just got to play the early demo. The freaking demo! That's just how much I enjoyed this tiny bit of gameplay, and I am super excited to see what else they release for this game. From the start, there was nothing that I didn't like about this game. Everything in here is just amazing. There were a few small bugs, but even those were incredibly rare. Only real problem I noticed is enemies getting stuck in lava. Not like immobile, but having to find them running around in the lava can be a little annoying sometimes. Besides a few spots where enemies could just get stuck, I mean, that's still incredibly rare, there was one true bug I ran into, and that was near the end. I wanted to try out Samuel again, and I can confirm he's definitely more powerful, as using the Jackrabbit, my beloved machine pistol. It's actually possible to get such a high fire rate with skills in Samuel's E that it bugs out the music for a little bit. Obviously, that's incredibly difficult to achieve, and this fire rate probably isn't intended, so that's one thing I noticed. The only game-breaking thing I actually ran into was falling through the floor. I have no clue why or how. I just stood still for a second on this carpet, and yeah, there's no box that teleports you back to the map. So you're kind of just free falling into infinity. When I tried to quit to the menu, the game actually crashed. Either way, I absolutely love this game. And thank you so very much, Tail Era Interactive, and especially Ollie, for reaching out to me and letting me play this. I'm extremely happy and honored to play this. I had a great time, as you can probably tell, and I can't wait to play more. Anyways, thank you all for watching. I truly appreciate it. This is going to be Enzo from Lookintogaming, signing out.